to the next edition of Slave Food as we look into why Blacks are sicker and sooner. We're going to go ahead and do a quick introduction of the doctors of the Slave Food Project. Dr. Columbus Batiste is a board certified cardiologist and chief of cardiology in Southern California. Dr. Batiste's mission is to share information so that each one can teach one about the benefits of plant based nutrition, daily exercise, and stress reduction. This mission has led to the formation of a nonprofit organization called the Healthy Heart Nation, which provides education through lectures, newsletters, social, and digital media. Dr. Eric Walsh was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He is a graduate of the University of Miami School of Medicine, Loma Linda University School of Public Health, where he received his master's and doctorate in public health. Dr. Walsh has embarked on his own plant-based journey and as a result has lost more than 70 pounds by adopting this lifestyle. Dr. Walsh has committed his life to speaking around the globe through his preaching and healing ministries. Today, joining the panel for Sicker and Sooner, we have the world-renowned, famous movie star, Dr. Terry Mason, who has, among other things, has been seen in at least 4 different documentaries that I'm sure a lot of you all are familiar with. One of them being Forks Over Knives, Diet Fiction, and most recently, The Game Changers. Dr. Terry Mason is a urology specialist in Chicago, Illinois. And although he looks about 30 years old, he has been practicing for over 42 years in the medical field. He graduated from the University of Illinois College of Medicine in Chicago in 1978. So with that, I will turn it over to the doctors, and thank you for joining Sicker and Sooner.
All right. It's good. Welcome, Dr. Mason. Man, it's good to see you. How are you?
Oh, I am like a drum with a hole in it. Can't beat it.
I always love every single time I get around you. I get like an extra dose of energy. Man, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's really good to see you. And first time getting a chance to kind of meet.
I'm so proud of what you've accomplished, Columbus. I mean, I really have to take my hat off before we go any further. I'm proud of what you've done and what you're continuing to do and how you're reaching out to the community to put this information out. It is a blessing. So thank you so much.
Oh, I appreciate that. You know, I mean, the honest truth is trailblazers like yourself are really the ones who have really given back to our community and sacrificed their time, your energy, and your career. And so when I look at aspects like that from forerunners like yourself, it just really inspires me that that's really the path that we have to journey on. And so I'm honored to kind of team up with Eric Walsh and Dr. Eric Walsh. And I know this is the first time you all are getting a chance to connect. Isn't that right, Eric? Yeah, you're still.
Oh yeah, definitely. Sorry, I'm still muted. No, I've seen your work on the documentaries, and we've both worked in public health departments, so kindred spirits from that perspective. So it's an honor. Glad to meet you, and I'm looking forward to this conversation tonight.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we dive into this week's conversation, we do a little icebreaker. So I want to know 2 things, right? I want to know from you, Dr. Mason. I want to know first, what is your most favorite documentary on Netflix right now?
You mean of the 4?
No, period. It could be of the 4. It could be total. What's your favorite documentary?
God, I haven't looked at one for a long time, to be honest with you, Baptiste. I just haven't. I can't even think of one, to tell you the truth. I haven't looked at I don't look at Netflix.
What's your favorite of the 4 that you've been in?
Yeah.
I think that Forks Over Knives is my favorite because I think it was the movie that really helped to continue to catalyze my own journey in plant-based eating. And I've been doing it now for several years. And like was mentioned earlier, I lost 42 pounds. Just by doing plant-based eating. So, and the people I met during that time all the members of that cast and everyone else are people that I've continued with a relationship with, and I'm grateful for it.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, I want to recap the audience, and for the viewers that are joining in with us and those who are going to watch in the future, I want to let you know that you're watching Slave Food Conversations put on by the Slave Food Project. And one of our main goals is really educating and giving back. And we're breaking down components of our lecture series that we gave Juneteenth. And this week's component is sicker and sooner. And so one of the things that 2020 has brought out is that we're dealing with America's dirty little secret. And America's dirty little secret is that America is sicker and sooner. That's the question. And African Americans seem to be sicker and sooner amongst all the others. And so the first question I have for Doctors Mason.
Before you jump in, though, let me clarify. We keep saying sicker and sooner. I want everyone to understand what we're saying is why that Americans die sicker and sooner, and African Americans die sicker and sooner. We're not just sicker and sooner. This is speaking to not just morbidity, but also mortality. And that's why it's such an important conversation.
No, that's a great clarification. Thank you for that, because it's true. We're dying sicker and sooner. And so I think the first question is a lot of Americans don't really realize that. And so my first question is, how does the state of health in America compare to other industrialized countries, right? In terms of just chronic disease in general. You both have been in the public health sector. Tell me what your thoughts are, the experience, your knowledge base as it relates to chronic disease. Is America as a whole dying sicker and sooner than other countries?
I'll let Dr. Mason go first and I'll jump in.
No, I would say, yes, there are other countries. You know, there is, just to give you an extreme, Bueller, I think his name, Dr. Bueller, wrote a book called Blue Zones. And there are areas all over and particularly around the Mediterranean, where people live much, much longer lives. I mean, the longest, if you look at my favorite source for information, which is the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency World Fact Book, the longest living people are in Monaco. And some people in other parts of Japan live much, much longer lives than we do here. I am going to just put it out that the leading cause of death in America is food, is the food that we eat. And it is the leading contributor to whatever you want to call it. If you want to call it so-called cardiovascular disease or so-called strokes or so-called cancers or obesity, you name your disease, diabetes, these are all food-related diseases. And that's why we die sooner and sicker.
I was going to say, the answer to that question also has to do with how you divide these populations. So what you'll find is that we focus a lot on race, and that African Americans die sicker and sooner. But the truth of the matter is, there's also a class component. So there is a segment of America, even Asian Americans, when you look at it in totality, that actually have much longer life expectancy than the rest of America. So it's a twofold thing. There's a race piece and there's a class socioeconomic piece. That some of the other countries are much more homogeneous. They don't have that problem because their population, the wealth is much better distributed, and there aren't the racial differences because they're predominantly one type of one ethnic group of people. So America's unique in that way. But it doesn't excuse the fact that we have the reality of early mortality and, more importantly, early morbidity that is incredibly taxing in terms of money, social standing with family, and even spiritually. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. That's one of the things I think is important and that struck me, even as we've given this presentation, we speak to really these disparities globally, is the fact that what we're seeing too as well is we're seeing that Corona has brought up that we indeed are dying sicker and sooner, whether or not it's from our higher burden of being testing positive and deaths in the United States compared to European countries and other countries, whether or not it's looking at our life expectancy, like what both of you really brought out, is that when we look at our life expectancy amongst industrialized countries, Americans tend to fare the worst in general. And so when we look at this, that on top of it, despite the fact that we spend more money, we spend astronomical amounts of money. We look at the things that we do from a technology standpoint. I love the toys that are inside the interventional suite that what we use on a regular basis. But when we look at these things, we are actually spending astronomically large amounts of money on a regular basis. And despite all of that expense, we have the highest burden of chronic disease global amongst industrialized countries. And that's where there is substantial issues that are there. We look at the rates of obesity are amongst the highest, where America falls inside of here on a consistent basis. When we look in general at the amounts of expenditures of what we have, avoidable deaths, this is the key, avoidable deaths, knowing that nearly 80%, as Dr. Mason brought up, majority of them are foodborne illnesses. We know that there's roughly about 80% are preventable, and this is across the board is what we're seeing. And so I felt like these are important when we look at the fact that of the treatment outcomes, Americans still, we suffer the worst. And here's the key that we never really touch on is that our health span is really impacted. And so health span, we look at longevity and we speak in terms of years of life lived, but really that health span is the onset, the first occurrence of disease, the first symptom of disease. It doesn't mean when the disease started. It preceded the onset that's there. And so some states have even suggested that our health span is as few as on average 60 years. That means we're living somewhere between 16 years unhealthfully, chained to medications, chained to disease. And that's really the fact that's been highlighted inside of this past year is the fact that we are indeed living sicker and sooner than other people. We're dying sicker and sooner than other people. So I wanted to make sure. Yeah, please
jump in real quick, because one of the things I think is really important is, so there's this whole convalescent phase of life for Americans where people aren't active, they aren't going out doing things. They're actually, many are institutionalized in nursing homes and other places, or under strict rehab, or need a lot of assistance. And so if you bring that into consideration, the health span is so much shorter. And I think as America becomes more sophisticated, we'll begin to look more at health span than we do lifespan.
Yeah. That's, please go ahead.
I was just going to say that we've done in one of the APHA meetings, American Public Health Association national meetings, there was this entire display and discussion around zip codes being more important in determining how long you live than your genetic code. And they did zip code and looked at life expectancy all over the United States by zip code. And even where I live in Chicago, you can take a 15-minute ride on public transportation and you'll go from one part of the city to the other part, and the life expectancy difference can be as much as 30 years of life. So there are a number of things as we get into this, and none of this is new. I'll just say real quickly, one of the things that why I left, I was practicing urology for 26 years actually as a board certified urologist. And really when I started doing erectile dysfunction work, it was real clear to me that we were treating, or that I was treating, the wrong disease. And as a matter of fact, I decided what I was doing by taking pieces of people out, whether it be a prostate or a bladder or kidney or what have you, other than for infectious or obstructive reasons, I wasn't really helping people. So I left the practice of medicine because this wasn't what I was signed up for, because I was not, all I realized that I was doing was managing complications. I was never managing the underlying disease. And therefore, I never could offer a cure of anything to any of my patients because I wasn't trained to cure anybody. We have been trained to be pawns and tools of the biomedical divisions, the pharmaceutical divisions of what we do in America. And the insurance companies, all of these people extract value from this value chain because of sickness. And the major value proposition that drives our so-called healthcare system is disease. It's not health at all.
Yeah. No, that's powerful. That's true. Especially, we just kind of contributed to an article looking at erectile dysfunction. And the biggest thing is that it is indeed just a canary in the coal mine. It's just the beginning, the tip of the iceberg of what's going on and brewing underneath the surface. And so, that's powerful, really, that transition. There was a quote, and I always get it wrong, by one of the first heart transplant surgeons. And what he said was, I saved hundreds of people's lives through my work in the operating room. But had I focused on prevention, I could have saved hundreds of thousands of lives. And so that's really the key, is really focusing our attention truly on intervention of these individuals. But, amongst the sick, so it's clear that America is sick. And Dr. Mason, you brought it out. You said that in areas of Chicago and other areas, we show by zip code, just where you live, and we bring this out, that folks are sicker and dying sicker and sooner. And so tell us about African Americans, the state of health of African Americans. There's a lot of emphasis and discussion really going on right now in 2020 that's brought to light some of the issues concerning the health of the African Americans in this country, and really globally as well. Recent article came out highlighting the disparities even occurring in England, affecting those who are brown and black skinned there as well. So let's jump into that a little bit. Tell me about our African Americans, the sickest of the sick, and dying sicker and sooner than everyone else.
Well, first, let me begin by saying that there's nothing inherently or genetically wrong with Black people. Okay, let me just get that out the way, because we have to be careful that we don't give that message, because there's nothing wrong with us. It's wrong. First of all, we live in a world that has been dominated for the last 500 years or more by a doctrine of global white supremacy. And global white supremacy is a doctrine that says that, in a nutshell, and there was a great paper written in Educational Theory by a guy by the name of Ricky Lee Jones that talks about these premises of global white supremacy. And this is the foundation upon which they use to go in into all the places of people of color, whether it be here in the United States, where they annihilated almost an entire race of folks called the so-called Indians, Native Americans. I hate to use those terms. Or whether it was on the African continent or wherever it was, they did not have a construct that valued our lives. That was that's a whole nother lecture. And there's a whole bunch of things, references I can give you about that. But be that as it may, the other part that we have to always think about is that I don't look at it from the deficit point of view. When I think about what Black people have had to endure, and you guys did a great job with this last week. I got a few of these additional slides. I always start with Imhotep, who was the real father of medicine and not Hippocrates. Imhotep lived almost over 1,000 years before Hippocrates, and this brother was a real doctor. And this is not me saying, this is coming from excuse me. This is coming from other folks who have put together information, not the least of which is one of the major scholars that are involved with one of our major medical schools. But I wanted to just say that we need to understand that we have to reset our thinking. And rather than look at us from a point of view of deficit, and yes, it's true that we do have more disease and we die sooner and what have you. But if you were to give us credit for what we've been through, I don't think we've done that bad. Now, could it have been better, but that wasn't part of what we looked at. And this, and I just wanted to follow up. This is a book about what the slaves ate. And this is a couple of things that, and I don't want to go through this because you guys did a great job of it, but this is a quote from Frederick Douglass that talks about this. And I wanted this DeBose Review. This was a journal that slave masters kept about making to help them justify what they were doing. And then they even talked about, in terms of feeding, the productive slaves should be fed more than the less productive slaves. This was a provision, a weekly provision. Now, why am I going back to this? Because if you look at this, this is basically cornmeal and bacon. This is what folks were given, and some milk. And when we look at this, because I want you to get to, we were suffering from diseases of malnutrition then. Because of the fatback, the cornmeal, the salt pork, we were unable to deal with some of the problems. And the problems that we developed from this nutritionally defunct diet, much like the nutritionally defunct diet we're eating today, is the skin irritations, rickets, toothaches, pellagra, beriberi, and scurvy. And this is just what pellagra is. We don't see it necessarily, but I don't know that we don't see it or we don't look for it, because I'm not a primary care doc, and I'm not sure how many of us, we always look at these horrific cases. But when we look at these 4 Ds of pellagra, which is diarrhea, dermatitis, dementia, in this particular things, and this is a B3 or niacin deficiency. We have lots of niacin. I'm sure we still have it, but I don't know how well we look for it. And so also about rickets and vitamin C deficiencies and scurvy and the anemia that we had. Now, one of the things that we did is that we didn't know that the things that we needed were in the earth. And so we developed a condition called pica, which means that we were eating dirt. And we were eating the dirt or the clay in order to extract some of these things. So this is what happens. And we're still eating milled, polished white rice today that contributed to a vitamin B1 or thiamine deficiency. And you add alcohol, which we do, and we're still eating white rice, which we are. The question is whether or not we have subclinical levels of this sort of things. And the issue that we have to get away from is that our diet was changed. The things that we were native to us, the legumes, the lambs, the sorghum, the watermelon, pumpkin, okra, all these things went back over 4,000 years. And some of the things like the tubers were 17, 18,000 years. So we already were eating this way. We were already doing these things that prevented us. How do you think we built the great civilizations and the great pyramids and things of that nature? We did that because we were eating both a good physical, mental, and spiritual diet. So this African origin about black-eyed peas, all of these things, we had these things. And we got to remember, according to Ivan van Sertima in his book that came before Columbus, we were already here and we were already thriving and we were already planting some of these things. So the distorted thing that we're getting, and I'm going to take a breath here in just a minute, but we had our own gardens, and you guys mentioned that at the last time. In this book written by Dennis Burkitt and Norman Temple called Western Diseases, it was clear that these diseases were, many of the diseases, and I'm going to show you in just a minute, were diet related. And so folks, blacks that lived in the rural area of the country had a low intake of these particular foods, the animal fat, and had a higher intake of the plant-based fat. And so when you look at the epidemiology of the diseases, talk about what we had then versus what we have now, I always like to use this slide because we always talk about Black people being so sick so much, so long, that we forget there was a time that we weren't sick from this stuff. And what this slide shows me is that when you look at urban Blacks versus rural Blacks, coloreds, because this is taken from South Africa, Indians and whites, you can see just clearly that our incidence of these diseases, with the exception of the cancer of the esophagus, was much, much, much lower because of the way that we ate. So I don't want us to take this thing and not understand that there's some reasons why we have these things. This is what public health is supposed to do. I left my practice, went into public health as commissioner of health for the city of Chicago, and then later as the chief operating officer for all of Cook County. And so one of the things that's really clear is that we never talk about primary prevention. And primary prevention is just what it says here. You're well and you don't have the disease in question. And they've tried to market these things as prevention things, and they're not. Man, you can have a mammogram every day and it's not going to stop you from getting breast cancer. You can do a PSA every hour and you won't stop you from getting prostate cancer. These, you can check your fecal, and you should do that. I'm not saying you shouldn't, because these are some of the early detection things, but they're not going to prevent anything. And this whole notion of signs and symptoms is the most backward way to think about any disease. Because
you're absolutely right. Because, that's one of the things I oftentimes say, just to jump in real quick, is that there is no prevention, there's only intervention. And so
That's
when
right.
we know that disease begins, it percolates inside of our bodies from a young age, from the moment that we come out, and our body's in a constant warfare against illness versus wellness, when our body's in a constant warfare against cancer. And there's some estimates that 40% of women by the age of 40 have precancerous cells for breast cancer inside their body, with statements of saying 50 to 60% of men by the age of 50 have prostate cancerous cells that are roaming there. We're in this constant battle, and our foods we eat can dramatically impact it when we look at these issues. And so it's not early prevention; it's early detection, perhaps on a macroscopic level, but not on a microscopic level.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so one of the things that we always want, that's why I think food, and this is why I'm getting back to it, that's why food is critical, because most of these things, I mean, the things that we eat, the things that we drink, like milk, which is loaded with insulin growth factor. Insulin growth factor is what helps take a 65-pound calf and turns it into a 400-pound cow. We don't need that sort of stuff. We've been given a bunch of stuff that is not true. The only person that needs cow milk is a calf. Humans only need milk as long as their mother's breast produces it. And after that, it's not necessary. And if
now that's excellent, because what you've done right there in that moment is you've recapped excellent components of our talk that we gave before, when we gave the Juneteenth slave food overall talk, and kind of bringing us through really the impact of some of the food substances, and also even taking us back to last week when we brought out, you're absolutely right, that we weren't always sicker and sooner. Weren't always dying sicker and sooner. You know, and Eric went through kind of describing his journeys inside of Africa, right? And looking at the foods that were there and reminiscent of the foods that historically, and you brought that back out to us again. Then we spoke really about how slaves really were resilient, and they were able to go grow foods and have fiber-rich foods that were there amidst the refuse that was given to them. And when they moved into the cities, just like you brought out right now, when we look at the rural individuals versus those city dwelling, what transpired through the Great Migration when they were actually placed inside of these really urban areas that contributed to the death. And so tell us a bit more, both of you, and Eric, I want you to jump in real quick here too as well, about really this state of health right now. Not that it's an issue as it pertains to being genetic. It's not an issue that we're cursed. Dr. Mason just told us it's not that, but what's the deal? What's the deal?
I think you have to understand that one of the reasons this is entitled slave food is because food, as you just brought out again this week, we bring it out every week. Somebody brings it, we bring it out somehow. Food was literally one of the ways to make the enslavement of Black people more profitable. Now, it didn't really work. They didn't understand the science well. I mean, so if you withhold rations in the Middle Passage on a slave ship, you're actually going to lose more cargo. But in their minds, there was a math that they did. It was a horrible math, trying to figure out how to make more money. Food was used to make money, in a sense. So just as was just shown, you were fed enough to be able to work. Like I say, every week, they fed you enough to work, but not enough to rebel. You were never going to be strong enough to really be able to do what you needed to do. That was the plan, at least, in how you were fed. Now, one of the reasons we are where we are today is because there's too much money in every aspect of the institutions involved in health and in medical care. So it's interesting. It's the Food and Drug Administration. Really interesting when you think about food and drugs kind of are managed by the same set of people. Not that there's anything crazy there, but it's an interesting thing. Like, you'd think food would go under agriculture, drugs would go under maybe under some kind of, health and human services or something, but it's interesting, right? Now, here's the thing. There's a fortune to be made off of selling people food that doesn't spoil, that always tastes good, that is relatively or directly addicting, that all of these things the food does. And we talked about that in one of our earlier talks. And it's prominent in Michael Moss's book, Salt, Sugar, Fat. Mm-hmm. Right? So we know that you can design food to make more profit off of it. And it is being done, has been done, and has been insanely successful since chemistry became super popular, super important in society back in the 1940s. But here's the other side of the equation. It's not just that giving people bad food makes you make money on the food. It allows you to make money on the diseases the food causes. So why are we running out of antibiotics in this country? Why do we really have almost nothing left to treat gonorrhea? We're one drug away basically from having completely drug-resistant strains of gonorrhea. Why are there so few antibiotics? Because you take an antibiotic for 7 to 10 days. It's not a lot of money in that. But there's a whole lot of money in being on a blood pressure medicine for 20, 30 years. There's a whole lot of money in being on diabetes medicine your whole life. And so we've created kind of a need in a sense, a financial need in a sense, but there are large corporations who make their money off of disease. So they're never going to, and they're in bed with the people who do the direct care in the medical community. Each one of us is doctors, right? I remember them coming in, feeding us. I've heard in the generation of medicine before me, they take people on cruises and take them on vacation and fly them around the world in order to get their medications prescribed. And so one of the mantras that we were told in medical school, Dr. Michael Greger talks about this a lot, is that when you bring up that, listen, actually, we could reverse these diseases if we removed cigarettes, alcohol, and these certain foods. If these things were removed, alcohol was down to a drink a day, most of these diseases would disappear. You know what they say? It's untenable. There's no way the American people are going to choose to eat that way. But you're telling us the American people will have heart catheterizations, open heart surgeries, chemotherapy, radiation, have their prostate removed, risk being incontinent the rest of their lives. That they will put up with, but they won't change their diet. And that is really the sweet spot of this whole argument, is that they've convinced you that you could, the suffering that you pay for from the medical community is a normal thing, but to sacrifice on a diet side, and it's not a real sacrifice, is almost undoable. That is the real problem and why the disease count is the way it is in this country.
But Rick, and I think you made a great point, and I think that what we have to do is we have to challenge that. And I have spent the last years, probably the last 15 years, really challenging that notion. And that the reason people don't do it because we don't tell them how to do it. We don't show them how to do it. We don't work with them how to do it. It is so much easier and so much, to your point, more profitable to push a pill or a procedure. And I'm not saying pills and procedures aren't necessary.
They have their place. Yeah.
But we are not as a community being as vociferous as we ought to be. And that's why things like this are great. And I can tell you just from my guy going back almost 20 years now, when I started telling these guys who I was treating for erectile dysfunction, because that's the canary in the coal mine. That is, and erectile dysfunction is an endothelial cell dysfunction disease. That's what it is. And when you are slaughtering your endothelial cells, eating the saturated fats and all this other crap that we eat, that's the first, but that's just the beginning. And what we don't do is what I learned is when you break it down and tell people the truth in a way they can understand it, which means you may have to change the words you use. Been doing this at our church for almost 20 years. And I can tell you, man, these people understand this and they get it. One other slide I'm going to show. Columbus, we did a study at our church. Our church is, 15, 20,000 people, something like that. And we had a little pilot that we wanted to do. And Kim Williams, Kim is the past president of the American College of Cardiology and at Rush. And so got with Kim to do this little study. So we decided we wanted to see if people would go on a vegan diet for Lent. So we picked Lent as the thing for people because people always giving up something for Lent. So they asked them to do this for Lent. I went and asked the congregation for the morning, had 3 services. First service, and asked 200 people came to the back to sign up for a 50-person study. The other 2 services was never got anybody. They didn't even get a chance to sign up. They were pissed off and mad at me because they couldn't sign up for the study. Now, I'm saying this to say that our people want to do better. We have to create the structures for them to do better. And I don't know how to go back to my slide, but what I would do, let's see, how can I go back to sharing my?
Yeah, go ahead and just reshare like you did before. One thing I'll say,
I don't see the little button, but what I wanted to show you was that we measured trimethylamine oxide. We measured these particular these particular chemicals that were causing inflammation. We measured insulin levels, and Kim got all this stuff. And I can tell you in 40 days, we had over a 45% drop in inflammatory markers like TMAO.
Wow.
In 40 days.
Wow.
I took and shared the results with my cardiologist. He said, we should probably put these people on a diet like this in the acute phase of when, because Paul Jones, I don't know if you know Paul Jones, but he's an interventional cardiologist, my good friend. And he was, brother, we need to be more forceful with our stuff. We need to be unapologetic. We need to do, whatever we need to do, because we know how to save our people. And we also know how to reverse this early death and morbidity and mortality that we're having. And we just need to make sure that we come together, because we know that food will do it, and the right food will do it. And we can I got a brother here. His name is, oh God, he'll kill me but he's a GI guy at the University of Chicago. And he is also a trained culinary chef who is also a vegan. And we're putting something together, because all you guys get to do is people taste the food. Then if they like it, and we know how to manufacture the taste and textures that we need with good food. Yeah. And we can do this. And that's what we're doing. And that's what we're working on right now. Edwin McDonald, that's his brother's name. Just a wonderful, wonderful soul. Baxter Montgomery, and Baxter in Houston. We went down, I took a cardiologist, I took Ed, I took all these folks down, and we're now going to go put everybody through, all of the people, because I got a bunch of folks lined up through that program. And I don't care, man. I don't care. Yeah. I just work. I don't even have a job anymore. My last job, I don't have a job anymore. I got fired from my last job because they wanted me to do something that on principle I couldn't do. I was not going to disclose names and addresses of people with COVID. I wasn't doing it. Okay. And I'm like, hey, time to go? Good. Time for me to go. I was retiring in the NED anyway. So I'm just saying, brother, there's just like when you looked at Food Inc. and when you looked at Forks Over Knives, we have to take this responsibility for our people, man. Yes. We could be all in.
One of the things that you said that really is important that I've heard is, there's a lot of people who don't even know. So obviously we have to get to where we have programs. And I talk about, in all of our talks, I talk a lot about churches and community gardens, churches having street, not health fairs, but having like markets,
farmers markets.
I don't know why that slipped my mind. So having that kind of stuff, exercise programs in the churches. Literally, if you looked at it from that perspective, Black churches especially, are in every quarter, every component of where our people live. But what saddens me, I have a good friend, one of my good friends in Miami. His father passed away. Very wealthy Black family, owned a lot of property, business, so forth. And I remember having Christmas, being at his father's house for Christmas, beautiful house. And his father was laughing at me when he found out I didn't eat meat, and said, "You can't be strong without pork." Literally, man said, he said, "If you don't eat pork, you can't be strong." And mocking me because I wouldn't eat, because I don't eat meat. It was crazy. And of course, unfortunately, it caught up with him. So I want to emphasize to people that there's a work to be done around this. And I think something you said earlier, Dr. Mason, that is really important is people have to be able to understand this. And this is why we're trying to do this the way we do it. We're not focusing on Black people isn't an exclusionary thing. In fact, we would hope to be able to expand to other ethnic groups that have similar problems or unique health problems. But the reason we have to do it this way is because this must be put out in the language, vernacular, and the cultural context that will make it resonate with Black people. Forks Over Knives changed my life. Let me tell you something. I read the China study before I saw the documentary, and that changed my life. You mentioned the insulin-like growth factor. It was when I read about casein. I remember I was working at the Orange County Healthcare Agency in the public, the head of the Family Health Division, the Public Health Department, and I was in the parking lot, and I'd read the book and I was listening to it again on like a CD. I didn't have Audible back then; they didn't have it, I don't think. And I remember when he went back to it, and I sat in my car, and I didn't get out. I said, "You mean to tell me all these years they've been telling me milk it does our body good?" And they've been showing me people with milk mustache on their lip. And when I was a kid, me and my two brothers would go through gallons of milk in a week, drinking cereal, milk at night to go to bed. This stuff was literally lining us up for lifelong disease. And it was like, let me tell you something. The reason I do this is because I feel like I was duped. I feel like so much of what was taught to me as a child and in public school and in medical school, was literally a conspiracy against health.
Absolutely. And Eric, to take one of your lines, right? I've adopted that line because I think it's so powerful. Resources go where value is placed. So when we really look at this issue of disparities and lack of education doesn't happen on the medical school level. Why? Because we don't value it in the tests that doctors have to pass to move forward. When you graduate from medical school, what are you prepared to do? To take your boards. Well, the boards don't value lifestyle and nutrition, so there's no resources that are drawn that way. Now you get out and practice. What happens in practice? You have to bill for procedures and for your thought process that once again, the insurers, the government do not value lifestyle. So resources do not go there. And so we have to change the paradigm, and it takes really this innate desire to say what we have to stop this cycle. I think it was Desmond Tutu who said at a certain point you have to quit pulling people out the river and go upstream and find why they're falling in. That's the key, is that we're trying right now to go upstream and stop this avalanche from happening. And so one of the things that we're doing is that I recognize in my own practice in my clinic is that many of my patients, I could tell them to read China study. I can tell them to read whatever book that's there, but they are not necessarily drawn to read those books. And so we recognize the power of film. We recognize the power of culture in identifying with individuals who look and have very similar experiences. And this is one of the main drivers that really catapulted us into this idea of not only a historical standpoint, not only a standpoint of how we got to this point, but like you said, we recognize that there are people who've come before us who've trailblazed, who actually were living and eating healthfully, and we weren't all dying sicker and sooner, and that we can grab hold of that hope that we can have a better life and invest in our future. And that's one of the things I think is so important about the work that you've done, Dr. Mason, the work that Dr. Walsh has done on a continual basis, and that jointly we're coming together and we're really trying to push the envelope forward and really get to some changes, because what we're seeing is that this is not a Black American issue, an African American issue. This is indeed an American issue, that when we're sicker and dying sicker and sooner, we're losing billions of dollars. Billions of dollars are lost because of lack of productivity. Billions of dollars are lost because of unnecessary healthcare expenditures. We're having families that are fractured. And now we end up amplifying this idea of a Black tax, that now all of a sudden we have fathers who are dropping out of the homes. We're having mothers who are dropping dead, grandmothers, and we're just pushing the cycle further. So I think those are extremely important things as we look for to the future on how we can change the paradigm of this whole idea of sicker and sooner.
Well, I think that we can erase that. We can totally erase this. This is within our reach to do. We have tools now that we never had before, like the one we're using right now. Before, to get on television, you know what it took? Not only did you have to satisfy the people for whom you were using their station, but now we can go direct to the consumers ourselves. And if we create the programming, we have YouTube now, which is probably in a little while going to overtake regular television anyway. But we have the tools that and the beautiful thing is, it don't cost us a lot. That we can use these tools, and there are people. I was just on a Skype, but on the Zoom last night with a brother that's what we call now returning citizen. He and then he's had some other issues, but our people are smart, man. People are smart, and when you give them the truth, and they feel that, because when you hear the truth, you know it. Whether you agree with it or not doesn't matter, but you know it because you feel it, because that's what it does. And so I can tell you from being in these churches for a long time, our people are coming around. They're looking for us. They're looking for leadership. I work with a church now. Church is on 76 acres. We have a program now where people buy a share in the food that we produce on the farm. So you buy a half share for $450, and a full share for $450, and a half share for like $260, and people buy it. See, we got to get out of this idea that we ain't got no money. We got we spent $3 trillion. We got a lot of money.
Yes.
Okay, stop it. We got a lot of money. And hell, if we ever give us reparation, it'd be the biggest economic boon that the country would ever see, because we spend it all in 24 hours. But I'm just saying that we have to stop looking at ourselves from a deficit point of view. We are resource rich. We don't always look at ourselves that way, but we are. We're just spending those resources with people that don't help us get better, that don't reinvest in our communities. And I grew up, and I say this and shut up, believe it or not. I grew up in Chicago, and I was able to see through the 60s and 70s where we had tons of Black businesses. I mean, the guy I grew up with working in the grocery store at 13 years old, which I shouldn't have been doing. But this is a guy that when people lost their job, they came in the store, he gave them food, let them shop like they always did till they got back on their feet. This is the importance of us. I must also admit that I came up in the Nation of Islam, and I was really programmed around doing for self. And we've lost that mantra of doing for self. We need to be trying to feed ourselves, which means we need to have our own land, our own farms, our own everything. And we can do that because we spend enough money right now to do that. And so with this farm that we're doing right now with this one church, like I said, they sit on 76 acres of land, but people come starting next week, they'll come for their distribution, and that money that they spend gives them a share of a part of whatever is grown. So we got everything from watermelons to basil to purple hull peas to squash to kale to Swiss chard, all of this stuff. And then we show folks how to cook it, and we let them taste it so they know that it actually will taste good. And there's ways to do it. So we just have to meet people where they are, not where we want them to be, but meet them where they are. And then you can take them where you need them to go. And that is the simple thing that we've been doing. And it works, man. It works, because I'm going to tell you something. Black folks, we're spiritually motivated kind of folks. And we can feel somebody that's trying to help us, and we can feel somebody trying to hurt us. And I tell you, these seniors, my group is a lot of seniors, and now we got a lot of younger people coming in too. So, and I'm going to be getting you guys to come and talk on stuff that when we get back, we'll be doing some fun stuff. But I just feel so honored.
I want to jump in here, Dr. Mason. You said a few things that have really resonated with me, and I'll summarize it this way. I think one of the things that oppression in America has produced, being taught that we're inferior, even by our own. I was looking at Lupita, I forget how to pronounce her last name, African sister. She has a children's book where she talks about what it was like, how I guess they kind of talk against the little girl for being the darkest one. I've never read the book, but someone's telling me about it today. So some of our wounds are self-inflicted. Is the point I'm trying to make. But what you're saying that resonates with me is the idea of not accepting the role of the victim, of saying, you know what, we're going to stand up and we're going to do better, and we're going to find a way to do better, like our ancestors had to. We're going to figure out a way to survive, and we're going to figure out a way to thrive. I think that's one of the most important lessons for right now, with everything that's going on in the country. This is the time when we can come together and actually build something that's protected. Like you, I studied a lot with the Nation of Islam, and I read a lot of the books. I listened to a lot of their speeches. Theologically, obviously, I can't line up with them. What did resonate with me at the time when I was listening to them was this idea of self-sufficiency. It was the idea of creating something for yourself. And I think when it comes to health, I don't know that we have a choice. Because I think that those who profit off of our illness will find a way to never be motivated to reverse that illness. And I think the coronavirus shows that very well. The horror stories that we're hearing about people going into hospitals, African Americans going to hospitals and being refused to be tested, only to go home and die of the virus, or come into the hospital last minute and die of the virus, still speaks volumes. So we have a lot of work to do in the prevention side. I don't think we're going to get to it tonight. One of the things we were looking at talking about was how this coronavirus has been the way to highlight the fractures in our society around health disparities. What happened? Why did this little virus do this? And there's a lot of reasons why, but fundamentally it is piggybacking on all of the diseases that food causes. And so to your point, we are in a position where we've got to find a way to do better, or we're going to be in trouble, because nobody's going to have the motivation to do it for us.
Brother, just real quick, one of the things we're working now with some people is looking at this notion that at one time, Black people have 500 hospitals across the United States. And this came to light because we've got a big problem here in the city of Chicago with our students graduating from medical schools, and some of them not matching, not getting a residency. And if you don't get a residency for at least a year so you can get through that last exam for licensure, you've wasted your whole time in medical school. And we knew that 100 years ago, which is why we had our own schools, so we could teach our own people and we could get them through and trained. And the way that they're not that's not happening now. And there's a whole nother group of folks that are really taking up this stuff. So I am always going to advocate for, I don't care how meager, I don't care how small it is, we have to start building for ourselves. Ain't no cavalry coming, man. Ain't no cavalry coming. If we don't fix this, you, me, Columbus, other folks like ourselves, we the best we got. We the best we got, man. Ain't nobody else gonna do this, and we can't talk it up. It is going to take hard work and organization to do it, and we were born for this. This is why we're here. We're not here for none of this other bullshit that we talk about. That's what your job is, Eric. That's what your job is, Columbus. That's what my job is. And if we don't do that, then we're not worth being even talked about.
Yeah.
Because we've done nothing. And so this is a great start. But all of us got networks, church networks, all these other things. What can you do? You do what you can with what you got where you are until you can do better. And that's what you do. That's how I've done it. I started this stuff. We were sitting in Soul Vegetarian restaurant with 2 people. The thing has grown to hundreds of people now. And they want to know how to do better. And these are all Black people. So it can work. And I know I sound like, somebody, but I just implore us, man, because I know you brothers have the spirit of God that wants our people to do better. You wouldn't be doing this if you didn't. Now we just got to work together, pooling resources, both financially and intellectually, and leveraging technology to do it.
And no, that's brilliant. I want to summarize kind of what I've heard from you all. And the one thing I'm hearing, the word that resonates with me is resiliency. We have to have built resiliency within our communities in order to kind of embolden them, right? And we always use this equation inside of our presentation where we say our health is tied to our resiliency divided by our stress. We're going to have stressors in life that are going to chip away at our health, but we have to build our resiliency as voraciously as we can through our nutrition, through our embracing, through giving, through empathy, through all these components in order to embolden our health as much as possible, because we need folks to understand that, number one, there is a problem out there. There is a problem, because if you don't recognize there's a problem, then you're fluttering around. So you need to recognize that there's a problem, and sometimes it hits us at inadvertent times. When some of this idea conceptually of walking through this sequence like came about, we were chatting with a friend, and he mentioned about having to get the prostate exam early, about having to get the colonoscopy early, because why? Because those things are specific for our ethnicity at times, because of our lifestyle, because of discrimination, because of stress, because of the food that lends itself to this increased level. And we're seeing these things when we deal with COVID, And so when this individual, when Joe McKenzie, we knew back in college, when he actually kind of asked this question, he wasn't joking around. He was just legitimately asking this question and saying, like, why is it? What's the deal? He basically formulated the question on his own. Why do Black people die sicker and sooner? We have to draw attention to the central core component, which is our food, our choices, that either lay the foundation towards illness or towards wellness. And that's one of the key things. And we're seeing this play out with COVID virus. We're seeing that it play out with the obesity, with the hypertension, the endothelial cells, the same ones that you brought out that lend itself. That's the special skin on the inside of your vessels that lines the vessels and can lead itself to like impotence or erectile dysfunction, the canary in the coal mine. That's right. It leads to everything that's there. And this is one of the key causes. And so we have to strengthen that. We have to strengthen it. And Eric goes into, I know, other talks, and we don't have as much time today, really looking at how these foods really actually arm and support your immune system. They arm and support your endothelium there.
We don't want our talks to be about what to not eat alone, but we really want to do a lot about what you should eat and why you should eat it. And part of what's really helped me is understanding that. My fear of the coronavirus is a lot lower because I understand that there are foods that actually are very protective against the inflammatory end phase of this virus that this virus causes. And so things like turmeric and curcumin. If there are anybody listening that's from India or Jamaica, where they eat a lot of curry, those foods are very good. I mean, the spice is a very good spice for that. And we have a lot of work in teaching people how food can be used as medicine. And I think that's one of the big components that we want to push. A lot of people want to push supplements, or they want to push medications. The truth of the matter is, the overwhelming majority, going back to Imhotep, the overwhelming majority of what we're dealing with can be dealt with if we just change our diet. And that is the toughest part of all of this, because we're in a society that has advertised to us and made us believe that you have to eat the way the standard American diet, which ironically, the wealthiest people in this country don't eat. They eat a lot healthier. Exactly. And we got to figure that out and protect ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, Eric, you're so right. And we have to understand, ain't nothing wrong with us. That's the first premise we have to work with. There's nothing wrong with Black people. What's wrong is what we eat and the things that we do. and we can fix that. So we're not hopeless victims of getting cancer earlier. We're not hopeless. That does not have to be our fate. And so that's the message that we need to translate for our our colleagues, as well as, because we come out of these schools programmed. So we need to be
so much programming. Yes,
there is.
Well, guys, thank you so much for your conversation and the discussion. And Dr. Mason, one of the first things that I wanted to come back with regard to the questions that we've been seeing, we've gotten a lot of comments, more so than questions, and which is great. So it's been very affirming. Everyone is very appreciative of the message that you guys are giving and your ability to deliver it without filter. And understanding the nature and the need for this information for our people. Lots of comments and affirmations when you said that we're not gonna, no one else is gonna do this for us. We have to do it for ourselves, and it's an individual situation that people have to choose for themselves, as well as to make available for their families. But one thing that you mentioned that I want you to say again, because it's so key. And that's your statement about, a lot of people think that there's something wrong with Black people inherently. So when you deliver it, it sounds a whole lot better. So if you don't mind just saying that one more time for us.
No, we got to understand ain't nothing wrong with Black people. Y'all can pardon my colloquialisms. There ain't nothing wrong with us, man. They make us think it's something wrong with us. But the thing is, everything is right with us.
Right.
Because if there was something wrong with us, we wouldn't have survived this. I almost said a bad word. We wouldn't have survived what we've had to go through. So no, you cannot be something defective when you've had to fight every type of offensive from food, both spiritually, mentally, and physically, and yet still we rise.
Absolutely.
So no, I'm all in for us. I know we are the people of God, and I know that we have what we need to fix ourselves. Stop waiting for somebody to do it. Ain't no Calvary coming. We all we need. And if we do that, we'll all be much, much better.
Absolutely. One of the other comments that we got was, if you guys don't mind, if you could list out some of the names of the books that you would recommend for someone who is looking to transition to a plant-based lifestyle.
Well, go ahead, but Dr. Mason.
Go ahead.
Why don't you guys all give us your favorite book, and then and we can just go around like that.
I'll give three.
Okay.
So I'm gonna pick the three quick ones that they probably know more than I do anyway. But the China Study is one that is a very strong scientific book. The China Study will give you a lot of ammunition in this struggle. The second one I would say is How Not to Die by Dr. Michael Greger. Columbus put me onto that, and that is a life-changing book. The last one I would say is Eat to Live by Dr. Joel Fuhrman. If I had to pick three books to start with, those would be where I would start.
Okay, Dr. Mason, do you have any to add?
Eat to Live is a redo of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's book called How to Eat to Live. Mm-hmm. He wrote that book first. And I
read both of them, though. The content is a bit different.
But it was written for two different audiences. I mean, we're intellectuals, so we look at it differently. But I would say our people are visual. So I would say watch Forks Over Knives.
Okay.
Watch Forks Over Knives. And there's also a companion book. There's a cookbook that goes with it. So I would say start right there.
Okay. Dr. Batiste?
So I would say look out for Slave Food coming to Netflix in the future. That's going to be one to catch for sure. I'd say that if you're at the beginning of your journey and maybe don't have an exceptional medical background, start off with maybe 22-day nutrition. It's a very simplistic approach that hits on all the core components of your life. And then I would add in there as a third book, as a reference point, How Not to Die. I think it's a wonderful book that points you to directionally into subject matter, asking questions simply like, what about eggs? Well, what about oil? Well, what about fish? Well, what about mercury? And so you're able to glean the information to answer those questions in a fairly concise fashion. But lastly, I'll throw in there, you can always follow us right here for the Slave Food Conversations. And with guests like Dr. Mason, you'll get your answers.
Okay, thank you.
Before you do that, I got to
yes.
say one thing I have to say. I do want to say because Elijah Muhammad's book was brought up, which was one of the books I first read about health outside of like school and so forth. There's another author that I have to recommend, and her name is Ellen White, and she wrote 2 books. One of them is called The Ministry of Healing. The other one is called Counsels on Diets and Foods. This woman wrote over 100 years ago, and I have to tell you, it will blow your mind how accurate she was on the topic of things like cheese and eggs and processed foods and so forth. And for those that are Christians, I would also want to throw in there Daniel chapter 1 and Genesis chapters 1 through 3 and chapter 6 to show you that the original diet, the African original diet, was literally the same exact diet that was found in the Garden of Eden, and it was changed after the flood in the scripture. So just to give you the reference that what we're talking about isn't some new thing. This thing has deep roots spiritually for all people, but especially for Black people.
1 in 29, brother. I use it all the time.
That's right.
If you want your car to run right, you use the fuel that the manufacturer told you to put in it. That's what the manufacturer told us to put in. It's right in Genesis. I give you every seed-bearing plant. They shall be yours for food.
Absolutely. All right. So there was a question about, you had mentioned, Dr. Mason, about the 500 hospitals that were owned and operated by Blacks. And the question is, what happened to them? And are there any still in play?
And we have 500 hospitals. We have 0 now.
Okay.
0 across the entire country. The last one to go was Howard University Hospital. But we don't own one hospital.
Not even the Aries do we own anymore?
We don't own one. I was to tell you about Meharry. We got to call Meharry because the students were finding a difficult time getting clerkships because they had nowhere to go. So we got a lot of work to do, and our ancestors did a whole lot more with a whole lot less. So we ain't got no excuse. They built those hospitals. But the thing is that because we believe white ice was colder than black ice, and that we are still subject, and that's a whole nother topic, Dr. Baptiste, we're still suffering from the infection of global white supremacy on the psyche of Black people, which is why we do and react the way we do to one another. So that's a whole nother topic. I gave a lecture at the church about that. I liken global white supremacy to the HIV virus and creating a destruction of our identity immune system. So it destroyed who we were.
Absolutely.
And allowed this identity, that was superimposed by all of the stuff that we saw. And folks have to understand, I grew up in a time when dogs had more TV shows than Black people.
That's profound.
That is.
Rin Tin Tin, Lassie.
Don't forget Mr. Ed. They gave one to the horse too.
So we ain't got nothing. And as long and we don't make our programming not a bunch of buffoonery, a lot of it a bunch of buffoonery and the same sort of stuff only done by Black people, we ain't doing nothing. So maybe I'm a little too radical, or maybe because I'm getting closer to 70 years old. So I don't look at things on that long thing anymore because I ain't got long and our people ain't got long. So we got to do this now.
There was a question.
We got the money.
Yeah. I mean, we spend it on other things, right? We'll put it on tennis shoes, but what are we putting inside our bodies? So someone wanted to know what the name of the church that you are involved with and that you had referenced about the gardens and things of that nature.
The church that we're doing the garden with is Vernon Park Church of God. They can go to vpog.org and they can actually participate if they choose to. But my church that we've done the work with the study with Dr. Kim Williams is Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago, 400 West 95th Street. And Dr. Moss, Reverend Dr. Otis Moss is the pastor. So that's where I do a lot of the stuff right there because he opens the whole church up. And I mean, we'll have 13, 14, 1,500 people show up. So I got to have some place to put them. Now, we can't do that now. We haven't done it because of COVID, but as soon as we can, we will get back to it. And we're going to do more of it streaming like we do our services now. So
We
stay
had a
tuned.
couple of the questions that came about or came across with regard to milk and, how it is still being recommended by a lot of doctors with regard to, the vitamin D that it provides to the brain for the babies. Can you guys speak to that at all?
Well, I'm not a pediatrician, but I will say that vitamin D and vitamin D3 is the active form, and that is a conversion. It's a multiple step conversion. The last conversion step is in the skin with sunlight. And when we're not getting the sunlight we need, this is a problem. So vitamin D3 is what people are supplementing with, and that you don't get that from milk, from as far as I understand. Now, what I do is milk is the absolute perfect food for a baby. And when
Calf, right?
no,
Oh,
for any mammal,
okay.
any mammal that gives it. So when our mother's milk is gone from their breast, we're done. You do not need milk any longer at all in your life. So that's true for every mammal on the planet. You don't see dogs suckling from cats. You don't see this cross species kind of activity. You don't see it anywhere except with us. And that milk is specifically made with these specific kinds of constituents, if our mothers are healthy and eating good foods, that we need to grow to be strong and healthy people.
Okay. Anyone else want to add to that? Or are you good? You good? Oh, good. Okay. There was a question, where's everyone located? So, Dr. Batiste, you're
So I'm
located.
thanks for that. I'm in Southern California.
Okay. And Dr. Mason?
I'm in Chicago, and if you got a question, you always just shoot me an email, terrymasonmd@gmail.com. Be happy to
Okay.
answer.
And Dr. Walsh?
I'm in Connecticut, in New England.
Sounds good. Okay. Well, those are the questions that we have today. So I'll leave you guys some time for closing statements. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. So let's go round robin and let's start with Dr. Mason and just summarize something you want to leave the folks with, those who are tuning in right now or those who may be tuning in later on, and give us some hope and summarize things really about this concept of sicker and sooner and some of the things we're faced with.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me thank you, Dr. Baptiste and Dr. Walsh, for this platform to be able to just have this opportunity to discuss this. If I would leave our folks or the listeners with anything, is what I've said several times. There is nothing genetically wrong with Black people. We are able, when we eat better and exercise more and try to live a more spiritually and mentally balanced life, whatever that means for you. And I'm not negating the impact of all the other stuff that we have to deal with, but I'm just saying that the stuff you can't do nothing about, don't worry about. The stuff you can do something about, do that. And you can take charge of what you eat mentally, spiritually, and physically. And so know that when you do that, you'll be the strong person that our Creator intended us to be. And we together can overcome all of this stuff. I don't care what the obstacles are. Our DNA is built on overcoming obstacles. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today. So we're from a line of people that overcame far worse than what we have now, and we can do far better than we're doing. Let's get together and get it done.
Amen. All right. I love that. Love that. Appreciate you. Dr. Walsh.
And I just want to say thank you, Dr. Mason, for joining us. It's been an honor and a privilege. Learned a lot, and your zeal is contagious. So I appreciate you just being on fire for the improving of the health of African Americans. So I guess normally I have a whole lot to say, and I don't tonight. I think we really did a good job of bringing it all out, Dr. Mason. You really led us well on this. But I would say that we have to be committed to the chronic, slow, difficult change. It's not sexy. It's not gonna get you. It's not gonna get you publicity. It's not gonna get you, followers on Instagram. But the kind of work that needs to be done is local and consistent. And so we want to encourage everyone to think about that. What can you do locally around farmers markets, community gardens, health education classes, cooking classes, health clinics, those types of things, to raise awareness where you are, and to bring health back into our community. So that's really what I want to leave people with, that this is a slow grind. This is work that must be done. We didn't build 500 hospitals because all of a sudden we got some venture capitalists who want to pop up 500 hospitals. We built those hospitals through blood, sweat, and tears. And so, that's how we're going to have to rebuild. It's going to take blood, sweat, and tears. And again, nobody's going to get famous doing it, probably. Nobody might even get rich doing it, but our people will be enriched. And I think that's what matters.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for your contributions today. Dr. Mason, it's always a pleasure. You're an incredible inspiration to us as physicians, and I'm sure to everyone who's tuning in just to listen to you. Your words of wisdom, your knowledge and mastery of history and the medical science is just, it's incredible. So I thank you again for being willing to join us. And whenever I call on you, you always kind of step up. So thank you again. Thank you again. I want to echo what you all have said. The phrase I've used many a times, I didn't originate it, but I want people to know that your DNA is not your destiny. Your DNA is not your destiny. You do not have to die sicker and sooner than people who are around you. You do not have to die sicker and sooner because a relative dies sicker and sooner, or a friend dies sicker and sooner. That you have the ability to make transformations in your life under God's grace, right? That can transform your DNA, can turn down the vials and the intensity of disease to help you live stronger and better and be of purpose inside this world. And so it's meant to be for each and every one of us to be the example that we want to see in our community. I think the one thing that I took home from this past week is the fact that we have to be resilient. We have to be resilient and show resiliency in our communities. We have to show resiliency and direct our dollars, right? So in that way, our dollars go and they demand what we deserve, right? That because we value this, we want our resources to reflect that. That's what we want to show, and that's what this is about. And this is a groundswell movement that we have to really, all of us, undertake. And so I'm extremely thankful for this session today, as we will be for the upcoming ones. I want you all to stay tuned for next week. Dr. Mason, unbeknownst to him, gave us an intro into next week when he brought up issues of stress and racism. He brought up issues in terms of it and looking at really the stress equation is what we're looking to tap into next week, and really focus on the contributions of this stress equation that Dr. Walsh always brings forth and tells us about. It's when our demands exceed our resources, and so we're going to explore this a lot more in this stress equation and how this has played a role in really forming this idea of sicker and sooner. So thank you both again. Dr. Mason, stay on board, stay on. It's a pleasure to see you. It's a pleasure to interact with you, and we look forward to having you on again in the future. All right, thank you so much.
Let me just thank all the people who have been referring folk to our YouTube channel and have been referring people to join in on these conversations. We love the growth that we're seeing. This is completely de novo. Dr. Batista and I are not social media gurus by any stretch of the imagination. So we do want to thank you guys, especially those who are having watch parties on Facebook. Thank you, and continue to refer people. We don't have millions of dollars to just throw up and do a documentary. So we are doing this the way we can do it, getting this information out, getting it recorded so that you can share it, so people can learn and they can have time with Dr. Mason that they don't even get in the documentaries he's been on. You got a real good chance to hear him and experience him in the hour we had with him in a way that a lot of people haven't. So continue to share. And thank you once again, Dr. Mason. You really are one of our heroes. So we thank you.
Yes.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
All
God
right.
bless us all, man, and give us the strength to do what we know we got to do.
All right.
Amen.
Slave Food family, we will see you next week, same place, same time. Look forward to seeing you 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Follow us on slavefood.org. Follow us on Slave Food Project on YouTube, and follow us on Slave Food on Facebook. Take care. Have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful week.